I'm Kimroy Williamson, and I have been given the task of introducing our next speaker. Dr. Paris Lyew Ayee holds a PhD in geography from the Oxford University and a Bachelor of Science degree in the Earth Sciences with first-class honors from the University of the West Indies. He is the director of the Geoinformatics Institute at the UWI Mona campus, where he is responsible for research and development of geospatial information systems, as well as services, solutions, and software development. He is author of many peer-reviewed publications and consultancy reports, including the award-winning Natural Hazards Atlas of Jamaica. He currently serves on many public and private sector boards, including Grace Kennedy, Water Resources Authority, Bureau of Standards, and eMedia Interactive. He previously served as director of the NHT and was once the director of the Department of Geography and Geology at the UWI. In 2014, he was selected as an Eisenhower Fellow, where he toured many of the world's largest leading organizations, along with highly select group of international leaders, where he developed global leadership skills and international professional networks. Today, he comes to speak to us on the impact of crime and violence on Jamaica's healthcare system. Please help me to welcome Dr. Lyew Ayee.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We have quite a turnout on our Sunday afternoons, but the presentation today, well, the theme for this conference is perplexing issues, customized solutions. And I don't think there's anything more perplexing than the situation related to crime and violence in this country right now. The cost and the impact on this country, both directly and indirectly, are quite severe. They are vexing and perplexing, but we have to take a very strong attitude as to how we're going to deal with this problem. But today, you guys have been exposed to many different elements related to your industry in the pharmaceutical field. But let's try to bring this all together into the broader society in which we, our families, our friends live, to try to get a holistic sense as we try to bring this conference to an end. Not quite as depressing as it may be, but you want to see your role in this particular endeavor. I want to bring your attention to this report here, the Cost of Care report. I want to also highlight my co-author, Dr. Deanna Ashley. Dr. Ashley, Dr. Ward, Professor McCartney, and Dr. Toppin, they're the real medical doctors. They're the ones who have been in the trenches looking at this kind of data. I was supporting them. But one of the things that we found out in this landmark study was the real dollar value of the impact of crime and violence on this country. So let's just take a look at this thing. But when you talk about the pharmaceutical industry, it's more than just drugs, isn't it? It's about business logistics, it's about your operations, it's about staff, it's about your patients, it's about all your customers, it's all about everything connecting together in the business that you're in. But we also have to understand the needs of the patients to access medication. What are the impacts of getting or not getting medication on broader society? And we need to try to connect all of this into where we are as a country. So today we're going to have three main sections of this presentation. We're going to introduce you to the technologies that are being used. We're going to give you a situation report, where we are with crime in this country. Crime has many different shapes, forms, and scales that we have to deal with. We get national crime statistics, but national crime statistics don't mean anything in Kingston. Kingston crime statistics don't mean anything in Denham Town. Denham Town crime statistics don't mean anything along Bread Lane or so on. So we have to look at the different scales at which data is collected and utilized. And then finally, we're going to look at the injury, hospital dynamics, and how all of this contributes to the cost of care in this country. So We're going to talk about crime, and then we'll talk about the health sector in a few minutes, but what we have to emphasize here is the concept of beyond maps. Mapping is one-dimensional, it's old. What you do with that information is far more important than mapping. And that's the element that we're going to connect in this presentation today. We want to not just look at relationships, we also want to predict, we want to simulate all of this information with what you know, with what other data are available to provide context. This is how you begin to develop a real solution in a comprehensive way. My organization, the Mona Geoinformatics Institute, has had all kinds of different adventures in different national objectives. But as you heard from my introduction, I'm a geologist. So how did I get involved in all of this thing? And I blame Dr. Ashley and Dr. Wood. Because what happens ultimately is knowing where is going to be a very important element in terms of how we come as a country to figure out what do we do. So we've done work in terms of mapping different police divisions. We've done GPS mapping for intelligence gathering inside communities. We've done firearms training simulations. We've been out in the field with the different police. We've been using drone technology. We've been mapping gang movements across the country in different political enclaves. And we've been defining the enclaves themselves, because simply telling someone that a gang is across the road isn't enough. You bring in the reserves, you bring in backup from other parts of the country. They don't know what across the road means. If you're already across the road, what does that mean? You start attacking the police station? You have to understand these kinds of relationships when you're doing operational activities. 3D rendering is very important to create a virtual world in which you can not just brief somebody with a stick in the sand and pointing out, you are here and you need to go there. You need to bring the world to you. What you're seeing there on the left is a virtual X-ray of New Kingston. On the top right is New Kingston at night. And then I think you recognize where we are in the bottom right. All of this is a virtual world. This is a virtual flankers. And you're able to see not just the density of buildings, but how you relate building density to slope and terrain, road network in those areas, choke points for ambush, patrol mechanisms. You know, in flankers, it's almost ridiculous to try to patrol that terrain with a Corolla. So what do? You put them in an open back Hilux in very tightly spaced communities with a hill overlooking the people sitting in the back of an open back pickup. So these are the kinds of situations. Flankers has the profile of Papine, not West Kingston. So patrol strategies in these kinds of areas cannot simply look at the crime element alone. You have to look at the terrain, you have to look at the layout, you have to look at the entire system at play here, not just looking at crime and crime alone. We've done 3D forensic recreations. Again, we can look at ballistics, we can look at blood, and we can recreate the crime scene based on forensic evidence, based on eyewitness evidence, based on whatever you want to throw in there. It's a virtual world. You control this. We have an MOU with what's now the Cari-Med Institute of Health Research, and we've done a lot of work in chronic disease mapping, malnutrition. We've done CHICV mapping, which I'm quite pleased with. We've done homeless people and mental health issues. All of these adventures, as I say, we begin to put Jamaica into context. You don't just show where sickle cell people live. You show the environmental conditions in which they live. Rainfall, elevation, temperature. You want to find out where the infants are, what is their exposure to lead. What is where the CHICV case is located? That's the bottom left. What is the relationship between CHICV cases and the fogging program that are going on? What is the likelihood of an explosion of mosquitoes depending on rainfall and uncleaned drains? Everything needs to connect when we're talking about public health and we're talking about environmental health. We've mapped every pharmacy in Jamaica, and we've done the kind of analysis of how many things are within 5 minutes, 5 hours, 10 minutes, 10 hours, whatever, and figure out the kind of, whether it's market analysis, whether it's transport logistics analysis, whether it's economic analysis, and so on. You want to try to figure out these kinds of relationships. Everything does not exist in a silo. We're connecting all the people between infrastructure, between social environment, between the natural and physical environment. So, that's the first part, mapping. So now we're going to talk about crime. This is a hotspot map of all crime in Jamaica for 2016. We're tracking 2017, but I'm not showing you any of that stuff yet. But that's Jamaica. And that's very important to understand. This is Jamaica hotspot for 2016. This is January 2016 pattern, January 2017 pattern. So patterns change over time as a result of activity or inactivity, as a result of natural progression or some kind of trigger that can create some kind of a result. This is a map, a chart by the Igarape Institute in Brazil that shows the different countries in the Western Hemisphere and the main crime centers and the main cities. What we're seeing here is that Kingston is the only city among the sample that it actually had a lower crime rate than the national average, and this is because of the effect of Montego Bay. Montego Bay is shifting the crime focus away from Kingston, and you begin to see that Kingston is the only city in the study that is below the national average. So, Kingston. That is Kingston in 2016. All of 2016, hotspot of crime in Kingston. That is first quarter 2016, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. In other words, the pattern of crime changes over time, depending on the time period that's being analyzed. However, Kingston had a fairly predictable pattern, Spanish Town Road into West Kingston, and you do have warm spots, not hot spots, in Papine, Grants Pen, Mountain View, and so on. Although Grants Pen has been pretty cool lately, you do have very predictable hot spots in Kingston over time. However, Montego Bay for all of 2016. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Montego Bay is unpredictable. We cannot predict the crime pattern in Montego Bay. Yes, you gotta know the scammer lived there, so that's not enough. That's not the same kind of pattern as it exists with gang-related issues in Kingston. Montego Bay has what is called a random pattern. And that's a cause for concern as to how we deal with that. So, people talk about different statistics for crime. You want to talk about crime by total crime. The number one community for total crime in Jamaica last year was Spanish Town. Total crime. The number one community for total crimes per 100,000 population would be Irwin St. James, but they only had 3. Central Downtown would have 54 crimes, but a per 100,000 rate of 2,500 crimes per 100,000 people. This is crimes, this is not just murders. And that's another very important statistic we need to understand. Crime is not just murders, in the same way a road traffic crash is not just a fatality. And we need to understand that in our reporting. In terms of crime per square kilometer, Denham Town is the number one community in Jamaica. It has the most number of crime in the smallest area. We can do crime by road. Spanish Town Road is the worst road in Jamaica in terms of crime, followed by Old Harbour Road and so on. This is crime by total length of the road, but you can now break down that road into segments. So 3rd Street in Rima is the worst road segment in Jamaica, followed by Kid Lane, Bread Lane, and so on. These are individual stretches of the road. So in other words, scale is very important when you're trying to determine what it is that you're trying to deal with. Ballistics. What you're seeing there, every point that you see connected was a crime committed by the same gun. So, these are all multi-gun crimes, okay? So you can see some dots are not connected, but they're connected to other dots, different gun. But each connected dot were crimes committed by the same gun. You can understand the kind of information in terms of intelligence, what you're looking for, how to deal with it, movement of gun, your patrol, your traffic checkpoints, and so on. This is important information to know. So, here we go. 3rd part of our presentation. The cost of care. What we're seeing here is that 40% of violent injuries, the victims are women, 60% are male. It can be very hard for me to read the actual statistics here, but you can see 45% of them were committed by someone they know, right? 15% were committed by a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So you have different statistics, different modes being analyzed here. But what we are seeing, and you can't really read it from the slide, but this is a particular case study. That what we're looking at is a victim that was admitted to intensive care unit, and this single case cost how much, Dr. Ashley? 5.3 million? 5.3 million for one case of violent injury admitted to the hospitals. Do you guys get copies of this presentation afterwards? I think somebody should give you guys this, because the numbers in there are pretty critical for you to understand the nature. It's not just violent injury, patch him up, tape him up, and send him home. You have different conditions, different circumstances, and the kind of information that you'll get from this can determine anything from a policing strategy against reprisals to how do you deal with domestic violence through counseling. And this is another case study of road traffic crashes. It's a different kind of case in hospitals. The circumstances of injury are different, but there's no less of a cost to the healthcare sector and to the country at large. And you in the pharmaceutical industry have a very important role to play in this. So, the linkages between hospitals and incidents are also very important. You want to be able to understand how far are people being transported from where an incident occurred to the hospital itself. Were there many other hospitals along the way that you passed? Should you have more ambulances? Should people stop throwing a victim into the back of a taxi and making something worse before it gets, you have a gunshot wound in your knee and you come to hospital with a whiplash? Right? You have to be able to understand the role of first aid in all of this, as well as the role of preventative healthcare in all of this. So, what we've done, we've mapped 8,419 injuries reported for a 6-month period in 2014. For that period, we had 1,392 road traffic crashes and 2,389 violent injuries. These do not include the 456 people who were murdered for that period. So you can imagine the kind of numbers we're dealing with in our sample. Cornwall Regional Hospital had 809 road traffic crashes that they dealt with in the period, and 1,246 violent injuries. And all of these cases came from 121 communities across the greater Montego Bay area. Not just Montego Bay, but the greater area. We're now therefore seeing a total of 544 communities out of 830 communities reporting at least one violent injury and one road traffic crash on these sample hospitals. We did not include, well, in this mapping, we did not include KPH, but KPH was used in the final cost of care study. So you can get to see what we're dealing with in terms of the hospital and injury dynamic. The red dots are the cases that were reported to Cornwall Regional Hospital. Every one of those dots represent the location where an injury occurred that was sent to Cornwall Regional Hospital. The red lines show what the range, those 121 communities, everything within those red line, every red dot within that red line was sent to Cornwall Regional Hospital for treatment. So you can see people are traveling some pretty good distances to get to Cornwall Regional Hospital. I'm sure there's several other health centers and hospitals or whatever along the way, but people are traveling very far to get to the hospital, right? Maypen, people are traveling on average of 22.9 kilometers. Spanish Town, 11.5 kilometers. Cornwall Regional, 22.5 kilometers. And St. Anne's Bay, 37.8 kilometers on average to get to these hospitals, okay? So we can look at distance relationships with the number of cases, and in many cases we see a lot of injuries that are occurring near the hospital. That's why you see those tall spikes with a low distance line running through it. But you do see the inverse occurring, where you have some very high spikes in the lines with very low injury counts. But these people are still traveling all the way to Cornwall Regional Hospital. So those are the cases at Cornwall Regional Hospital. You can see how many injuries and how many road traffic crashes are occurring by community into each hospital. So for Cornwall, downtown Montego Bay, Mount Salem, Flankers, Rose Heights, and Albion are the top communities being sent to Cornwall Regional Hospital for injuries, for violent injuries. But you do see somebody came from St. Andrew to go to Cornwall Regional Hospital, Friendship St. Mary, Port Maria St. Mary. These guys, this is not a simulation, this is actual figures. Somebody from Port Maria went to Cornwall Regional Hospital. I don't know if he got lost. So you agree with that or don't agree with that or what? Anyway, doesn't matter, it's fact. Maypen. People are coming from Maypen, Forepass, Sandy Bay, Palmer's Cross, Denby. Makes sense. But people are also coming from Westmoreland to go to Maypen Hospital. People are coming from Moko St. James. Okay? I don't know whether, Dr. Ashley, people have preferences. They like the doctor there or something. Maybe they like the pharmacist. Doesn't make sense, but we do see these cases being brought to Maypen Hospital. St. Anne's Bay, Ocherias, Brownstown, Steertown, Runaway Bay, makes sense. Windsor, Portland, York, St. Thomas, going to St. Anne's Bay Hospital. Cave, Westmoreland, Bluefields, Westmoreland, going to St. Anne's Bay Hospital doesn't make sense. But there he was. Spanish Town, Old Harbour, Gregory Park, Central Village, Ensom, makes sense. Flower Hill, St. James, Rosemount, Westmoreland, St. Thomas. Why are these guys going to Spanish Town Hospital? Right? Right? This is intensive care, right, Dr. Ashley? This is not as if they were sent somewhere and then sent back afterwards. That's right. All right? So, in an ideal world, you'd go to the nearest hospital. Maybe there's some kind of a reason why people don't go to the nearest hospital. But in an ideal world, that's what you do. And the relationships between those lines and those bars become different in this world. But Spanish Town Hospital is the closest hospital for most crashes in the study. And Cornwall is the closest for most crashes in the West, the furthest hospital, closest hospital. KPH and Lyew were not particularly close for crashes in this particular scenario. But these are road traffic crashes statistics. But what we do know is that injuries are found within general proximities of the hospitals. But where hospitals may have large ranges, and this is important, Cornwall Regional, KPH, are very big, very significant hospitals with significant resources, and they can treat a wide range of cases. But if you do have deployment of resources closer to where crashes are occurring, especially for violent injuries, what is the role now of prevention? What is the role of community intervention, social intervention, counseling, first aid in schools, in terms of preventing the need for someone from Westmoreland to travel to St. Anne's Bay Hospital? So we look at the direct costs now of injuries in Jamaica. We are looking at, in the case of violent injuries, direct costs in the 7 hospitals studied by Dr. Ashley and her team. We're looking at $2.2 billion, Dr. Ashley? $2.2 billion in direct costs from violent-related injuries in the hospitals. But when you look at the total costs, direct and indirect, including loss of earnings, if a 25-year-old man gets shot and is disabled for the rest of his life, how much did we lose from 40 years of productivity from him? Runs up to, including suicides, runs up to $12.6 billion in costs. For violent injuries, $3.6 billion, 44% of which is hospital stay, 1% is drugs, 12% is consultations, 13% is dressing and disposables. So that's where the costs are coming from. When you look at the average cost of violent injuries of $147,000 per person, $402,000 for a gunshot wound, $194,000 for a sharp force injury, and $115,000 for blunt force injury. This adds up with the number of cases that we see every year. There is, incidentally, there is a 4-to-1 relationship between violent injuries and crimes reported to the police. So what this means is that all those crime statistics that you see, multiply it by 4, and that's what's going to the hospitals. That's a lot. So, what we're doing here, we're trying to emphasize that data is very important. We want to understand the role of prevention at the community level. You want to talk about public education in trying to stem this kind of critical situation that we have here. We have to understand the need for first aid. It will be always important, but also equipment and resourcing for our medical personnel will be important. Now finally, what we want to talk about is the need for a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral approach. What this means is that health data should not just stay with health practitioners. It needs to go to the crime interests. The crime data needs to come to you guys. So much of the country data system, including anything ranging from traffic data even, has to be flowing to many different people to understand the context in which we are dealing with. And what is important to someone who works at the university is that academic research cannot just stay within academia. It needs to be shared with the people in the field, in the trenches. And likewise, your data needs to be coming to the research arena, and it needs to have that free-flowing information between the two. Decision-making needs proper data, it needs proper information. You guys can't simply be reacting to certain situations that are going on out there. You guys need to plan your future as business people, but also as citizens with your own families to worry about. But I think that's the last slide. Are there any questions? That was, yeah. Any questions? Minor?
I must say a big thank you, and I've always admired you because you have put data into practice.
Thank you.
For too long, Jamaica has been known to be overstudied.
Yep.
And I worked with the Ministry of Health. And in this room, we did quite a bit of research, and the tomes are sitting somewhere in UTech,
okay.
Some very relevant studies.
Mm-hmm.
The Ministry of Health also has most relevant data, which has not been implemented.
Right.
They're collecting dust.
Right.
And I really admire you and congratulate you because a lot of what you have come up with have been actualized,
right.
And people are acting on them. But I'd just like to know, I think Dr. Ashley, at one time we did in the Ministry of Health the emergency training with the persons who would be first on scenes of motor vehicle accidents and whatever. That has been shelved. And I'm appalled that when we have motor vehicle accidents that are so critical, it's a person with the pickup or the taxi that they are slung into the place. There's nothing at all called emergency medicine in Jamaica, which I think should be addressed.
That's right.
Thank you for your presentation.
There are two things in what you said a while ago that is important. The first thing in terms of road traffic crashes. We see figures that are thrown about how many people have died this year from road traffic crashes. I need to emphasize that fatal crashes amount to 3% of the total number of crashes in Jamaica. 3%. 74% of all crashes in Jamaica are fender benders, broken headlight, scratch bumper. 74%. But these also include those crashes that tear down a stoplight or tear down a pedestrian barrier. Nobody got injured, nobody got hurt, but you still have the removal of road infrastructure that are designed to protect people. So when somebody drives along the road and the stoplight is gone and him get killed, that was already recorded before, but nobody got hurt, so we should just ignore it. 3% are fatal. 13% are major in that they require hospitalization, and the rest would have been minor injuries. These minor injuries and serious injuries are the ones that are burdening the healthcare sector right now. Not the 3%, they're dead, right? But you do have very important elements of dealing with the first aid, first on scene response. The second one is a data that's sitting down. And I'm sure that you have that studies in the ministry that are sitting down, but there's also studies in academia that are sitting down. The case study of this is CHICV. According to the Ministry of Health, only, 1,500 or so people had CHICV? That's clearly not true. You guys made a killing off selling, and it wasn't just to the 1,500, right? But how do you figure this out? How did we do our CHICV information? We looked at school absenteeism. Schools have the best network of the most people in Jamaica. Schools are not necessarily situated because there's a there is some kind of business demand, the way a bank has to be situated in towns. Schools are where the people are, wherever. And we looked at absenteeism and we got 48,000 people in that period in 2014 that we were able to capture that information. So you have to be innovative. You have to think outside the box to try to collect indicative data, not just clinical data. Any other questions?
Hi. Oh, hello.
Can I see? Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, how is it that you came by the data that determined how far patients travel to hospital?
Right. Each case had information in terms of where the crash occurred. We know, or violent injury occurred. We know where that happened, so we can map it. We also know that it ended up in Cornwall Regional Hospital, so we can do similar to what we did with the ballistics in terms of connecting an incident with a hospital that it was treated. However, in this case here, we use the road network now to plug in the connections, and therefore you could easily calculate the distance in 2 seconds for all cases.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ayee, for your informative presentation. Now, we could sit and talk all day about data collection and all of that, but may I suggest a few points, humbly so. For instance, your presentation showed that there was a commonality of weapons used to perpetrate many crimes, right? And it also showed that there's a challenge from scene of crimes, scene of accident to urgent medical care, really distance from the hospitals.
Yep.
Your presentation also shows where crimes are concentrated in various communities.
Yep.
So I just have a simple suggestion for each. One, where you have crimes that are concentrated in various communities, covertly place cameras in these areas, no fanfare.
Yeah.
The fanfare comes when you solve the crimes because of this technology.
Yeah.
Second, as regards to guns, there was a situation where a dog was found out in the sea, and it was rescued, and it had a coded electronic device that showed that its owner was knocked down while jogging, and the dog was traumatized. We can put up device in all weapons, legal or otherwise, in Jamaica. The other point, the paramedical training. We have this in developed countries. We have the NIF fund. We have a lot of drugs and resources being wasted with drug serve where people getting medication free. Much of them that they don't need. They are trading these medication for what I understand. Mm-hmm. Why can't we have a paramedical team based on your data in various areas, probably 1 per 3 parishes, depending on each the split of the data.
Yeah.
We might have for one particular parish, 1 in 3 parishes.
Yeah.
We need to have solutions to these things.
Right.
Talking is not a...
Yeah. I'll take the CCTV and electronic tagging together. What is important is that the technological potential and solutions are there. The question is not whether CCTV and electronic tags can work or can do it. It's how is it going to be implemented? How is it going to be sustained and maintained? It makes no sense that we're able to have this technology and we don't use it. Case in point, right now, how many of you know along the Palisadoes main road, there is a speed camera averaging system one of which the camera is located right across the road from Gypsum, and the other camera is located right across the road from Caribbean Maritime University. When you pass one of those signs, it takes a picture of your license plate. When you pass the other one, it takes it again and calculates the time it took you to travel that distance. Now, if you were following the 80-kilometer speed limit, you should cross those points in a certain amount of time. If you do it too fast, you are speeding. Simple as that. A spot check doesn't do anything because you can slow down when you see the radar or whatever, or people flash their lights. But the speed averaging system calculates the speed throughout. Port Royal Street has a traffic camera that can take a picture of your license plate if you run that light at Port Royal Street. There are also cameras that can take pictures of license plates and know how many warrants are out for you because you don't pay your 900 tickets. None of these work. Every one of them take the picture, every one of them show the driver, none of them prosecuted. So it's not a technological problem. The situation here is the will to enforce the law. So CCTV, they even talk about shot spotter software. None of these work if you simply get a shrug, so it go. And that's apathy is the main problem getting in the way. Any other questions?
Yes. Oops. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayee.
Where are you?
I'm
Okay. The sun is in my eye right here.
Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. We were theorizing, and tell us how correct we could be with this theory. That maybe one of the reasons why persons go so far for healthcare could be related to the fact that they may be trying to evade the authorities.
I don't know.
And
I'll try it myself.
And the other theory, I don't know, maybe you can tell us, why is it that the same guns have been found to commit crime in so many different places? Any theories?
I didn't get that last question.
I'm asking if you have any theories on why you're saying that the same gun has been found to commit murder in many different places in the island.
Okay. You have many different uses for the same gun. And what we have seen is the same gun being used on crimes along that street. And that tells me the gun is in that area. But when you see a gun being used for a crime in Flankers, also being used for a crime in Savannah Lamar, it tells me that gun is mobile. We have many different theories regarding whether it's contract killing. It may not be the same gunman, but it is the same gun in the multiple crimes. And we also have situations where you have multiple shootings in a single event, all of which are with the same gun, all of which track in the same location. We have seen a gun used in about 4 or 5 crimes in Kingston and 1 in Port Antonio. That was weird. So you see, that event in Port Antonio was an outlier in terms of the use and pattern of that gun. But you do see situations where we're watching the gun moving up and down. What this means is that when the police conduct vehicle checkpoints, you need to know where. If a gun is freely moving between Savannah Lamar and Flankers, you now need to start looking at your checkpoints in between Flankers and Savannah Lamar. That gun is moving between those 2 areas. Gang movements, like I showed you in a map earlier on, you can track gang movements, especially if you know their motives, and based on intelligence, you can figure out what's going on. But what's important is that we don't just jump to conclusions without data or evidence. We need to look at those relationships. You cannot just look at it and say, yeah, it feels so. You have to have this with the right amount of intelligence. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yes, Doc. Good day. Very good presentation. I was always of the notion that most crimes are committed very near to hospitals. For example, Denham Town is located near to KPH. We have Spanish Town Hospital, Cornwall Regional. I realize But from your presentation, I'm thinking twice. But I was always of that notion that most crimes are committed near hospital because the criminals have the notion that they can get fixed up quickly. And I was wondering, with regards to persons traveling from Sablamar to Cornwall Regional, if they were fleeing persecution from other peoples in the community. And there was another point. I forgot the other point.
Well, one of the most that we don't know, and one of the key things here is that I'm not free to speculate on those kinds of that kind of, especially persecution. But we have seen patterns in other studies that we have done, where we look at where we for example track all reports now to the Halfway Tree police station, for example. Not just crime reports, but reports including lost documents and stolen passport, those kind of reports that are sent to Halfway Tree. But we do see an inordinate amount of Papine-related crime reports being made at Halfway Tree. That doesn't make any sense, because why would you have a Papine-related incident being reported at Halfway Tree? And the answer is twofold. One, they're sick and tired of the Papine police station because they don't bother respond and take forever to get back to me. That kind of customer service element of the police station. And the other element is one of trust. So they don't report a Papine issue to the Papine police station because they don't trust the Papine police. Very, very weird type of things here. But in the case of medical treatment, I don't know, if I have a bullet hole in me, I'm going to the closest hospital, not 2 parishes away. But you know.
A question here, sir. You said that the cameras are out by Palisadoes. And cameras can be used for 2 things.
I can't see. Where are you?
All right, so the cameras can be used for 2 things. One, to prevent a crime, and one, to actually catch the person in the act.
Yeah.
You said the data is not being used, that's one thing, but if persons are aware that these cameras are placed at different places, don't you think that it will reduce the speeding of persons? So people of Jamaica need to know that the cameras are around.
There's a strong deterrent role of cameras in communities. But at the same time, the minute people know that those cameras aren't working or they're not being used, I mean, they could probably pretty much use it for target practice, the way some of these areas are. But the reality is that, yes, there is a deterrent role in it. But until we are able to actually do something with it rather than just it's sort of like a beware of the bad dog and you don't have a dog. So you have to be very important. Thank you all very much.
On behalf of the Cari-Med group and specifically the Apotex team, and of course our guests at the CE, I'd just like to extend this token of appreciation to Dr. Lyew Ayee for a very informative and interesting presentation. One I'm sure many of us will take the key concepts and some of the key notes right back to our family members as well as the wider society. So thanks again.
Thank you.